The stars shimmered beyond the viewport of the cruiser Solstice. The galaxy stretched wide and endless ahead of them. Tarixa stood in the quiet observation deck, arms crossed just below her chest, the fabric of her alliance-issued outfit clinging to her bronze-orange fur like a second skin. Her golden eyes followed the flow of passing debris fields and refueling ships, but her mind was elsewhere. Behind her, soft footsteps echoed in the silence. Rylan entered, freshly debriefed and still adjusting the collar of his uniform. The door hissed shut behind him, muffling the distant hum of the ship. He didn't speak at first. Just stood there, watching her, taking in the quiet strength of her silhouette against the starlight. "They're sending us out again," he said finally. Tarixa turned slowly. "Already?" He nodded, stepping closer until the warm light caught the edge of her cheek. "Recon patrol. Neutral zone near the outer mall. Apparently some border world's gone silent." Her ears twitched. "You think it's more than silence?" "Probably," he murmured. "But they're not calling it a combat mission. Just observation. You and me. One scout-class ship. Low profile." She studied him for a long moment, then stepped closer. Her clawed fingers rose and gently touched the front of his uniform. "They still do not trust me." "No," he admitted. "But they trust me." Her gaze softened slightly. "Then they are fools. I am the one who kept you alive." Rylan grinned. "I keep trying to tell them that." Her fingers stayed on his chest a moment longer, then slid lower, resting just above his waist. The heat between them was immediate. Electric. She leaned in, her breath warm against his neck. "And if this mission is not peaceful? Then we do what we always do," he said, voice lower now. "We fight. Together." Her lips brushed his jaw, a slow, silent acknowledgement of the bond that had only deepened since they left Fro 67. "I will not lose you," she whispered. "You won't," he breathed. Their lips met, slow, hungry, familiar, and everything else, from duty to orders to protocol, fell away for just a moment. Because here, in this stolen breath between stars, it was just them again. Together. The kiss lingered, deepening as the quiet of the observation deck wrapped around them like a blanket. Tarixa's hands slid up his back, her claws careful but possessive, drawing him closer until their bodies pressed together in the low golden light. Her fur was warm against his skin, and when she broke the kiss, it was only to rest her forehead against his, her voice husky and low. "Your heartbeat is fast," she whispered. "It usually is when you're this close," Rylan murmured, his hand brushing along the curve of her waist, fingers trailing the edge of her belt. "You really think I'm going to make it through a recon mission like this if you keep looking at me like that?" She smiled, her fangs barely showing. "Good. You'll be alert." He laughed under his breath and pulled her into another kiss, slower this time, his fingers curling gently into her fur as she let out a soft sound, somewhere between a purr and a growl. She melted into him like fire into embers, her tail wrapping loosely around his leg. But then, the door beeped. They froze. "Lieutenant Shaw, you're wanted on Deck 6, came the voice over the comm. "Mission briefing in 10. Rylan leaned his forehead against hers and groaned. "Of course." Tarixa's ears flicked back, annoyed, but she didn't move away. "You should go." He gave her one more kiss before stepping back, brushing a few snow-colored strands of her hair away from her face. "We both should. They're not separating us. That was part of the agreement." Her golden eyes searched his. "Then they are wiser than I thought." Together, they moved through the corridors of the Solstice, heads turning as they passed. Even now, even after her presence had been sanctioned, Tarixa drew stares. Her form was fierce and elegant, a contrast to the cold steel of the ship around her. But beside Rylan, she held her head high. No longer hiding. No longer uncertain. By the time they entered the briefing room, the tension in the air was thick with more than just military urgency. Because what awaited them on that mission wasn't just silence. It was something far older. And far more dangerous. The briefing room was dim, lit by the cool glow of a holographic projection hovering above the circular table. A sector map rotated slowly, highlighting a region marked in red, Zone K-17, deep in the neutral quadrant near the outer maw, far beyond the usual patrol lanes. Commander Elin Voss stood at the head of the table, arms folded, her expression as tight and weathered as ever. She gave Rylan a small nod, then looked to Tarixa. "Glad to see you're still keeping him alive," she said dryly. Tarixa tilted her head. "Only because he insists on walking into danger." Rylan smirked and took his seat. "What are we looking at?" Elin tapped the console. 3 colonies stopped transmitting last week. No distress beacons. No mechanical failures reported prior to loss. Just silence. Full comms blackout. Tarixa narrowed her eyes. Were these colonies armed? Light defenses. Civilian-focused. Mostly resource operations. No record of conflict. But something's off. Elin zoomed in on the outermost colony, its coordinates flashing. Scout drones sent to investigate vanished before reaching orbit. Rylan's brow furrowed. Pirates? Maybe. Or something new. Tarixa's gaze sharpened. What do you suspect, Commander? Elin met her eyes without flinching. I suspect we're walking into something we don't understand. Which is why they're sending you 2 in first. 1 ship. Low visibility. Get in, get recon, get out. And if we find survivors? Rylan asked. You do what you can. Tarixa's voice was colder now. And if we find something else? Elin didn't answer. But the silence was enough. Rylan leaned back in his seat, his fingers brushing against Tarixa's under the table. Her tail wrapped lightly around his ankle in silent acknowledgement. Whatever was out there had swallowed 3 colonies whole. And now, they were being sent into its maw with nothing but instinct, training, and each other. He met Tarixa's gaze. You ready for another fight? She didn't blink. Always. The sleek black hull of the Ardent Whisper shimmered under the docking bay lights as Rylan and Tarixa stepped aboard. Designed for stealth and speed, it was nothing like the bulkier Solstice. Its corridors were narrower, its systems stripped to essentials. No backup. No escort. Just 1 ship, and 2 passengers willing to cross into silence. The airlock sealed behind them with a soft hiss. Rylan dropped his pack beside the pilot's seat and ran a systems check. All green, he muttered. Navarre calibrated. Life support stable. 1 bed. Tarixa's ear twitched. 1? He gave her a lopsided smile. We've shared worse. She prowled past him, inspecting the ship's interior like a seasoned predator checking her den. The confined space didn't bother her. If anything, she seemed more at ease surrounded by tight walls and steel. Cabin small, she noted. No bath. No sense-soothing stones. You'll survive. I'd prefer thriving, she said, brushing her hand across his shoulder as she passed. His breath caught, but only for a second. We'll have time to thrive after we come back. Tarixa paused at the viewport, gazing out at the stars. If we come back. Rylan approached her slowly. You scared? No. Her voice was firm. But I feel a pull. Something waits in that region. Not hunger. Not rage. Something quiet. He stood beside her. We'll face it together. She looked up at him, her gaze soft but unflinching. If you fall, I fall. And if we rise? Then we rise as one. They launched an hour later, the Ardent Whisper slipping into the black between systems, its engines barely making a sound. The stars blurred past them, streaks of silver and blue stretching into the abyss. For long minutes they said nothing, just watched the stars. Rylan finally broke the silence. You think it's something ancient? Tarixa didn't move. I think it is something forgotten. And it wants to be remembered. Ahead, K-17's coordinates glowed red. The silence was waiting. 12 hours into the journey, the Ardent Whisper dropped out of FTL with a jolt of gravity that pressed Rylan into his seat and made Tarixa's tail flick sharply in agitation. Before them, K-17 hung in the void, a pale, dust-choked planet orbited by 2 shattered moons and a ring of drifting debris. The star it rotated around was dim, its light more shadow than warmth. There were no signs of defense satellites, no active relays. Just the wreckage of silence. Nothing on standard comm bands, Rylan muttered, fingers dancing across the control panel. No active pings. No thermal signatures from the surface. Tyrix's golden eyes narrowed. Look closer. He adjusted the scope, switching through the spectrums. And then, just for a moment, a flicker. A pulse. Not a beacon. Not automated. Manual signal, he said. Shortwave, analog. That's ancient tech. Someone is calling. Tyrixa said softly. Or something. Ryland locked onto the source. It was near the equator, buried beneath what looked like a collapsed mining station. He zoomed in. The signal was coming from beneath the rubble. Could be a trap. Tyrixa placed a hand on his shoulder. So could the silence. He nodded, already keying in descent protocols. We land. We stay close. And if anything moves down there, we finish it, she said, claws gently clicking against the armrest. The whisper pierced the upper atmosphere like a ghost, cutting through pale cloud layers until the surface stretched below them, gray dunes, cracked stone, and the black skeletons of buildings long abandoned. No lights. No sound. Just wind hissing through ruins. They landed near the collapsed structure. As the airlock hissed open and Ryland stepped onto the brittle soil, his breath caught in his throat, not from fear, but from the weight of what surrounded them. This place wasn't just abandoned. It felt forgotten. Tyrixa dropped beside him, scanning the horizon. We are being watched. He followed her gaze. Nothing moved. And yet he felt it too. Eyes in the dust. Whispers in the wind. The wind whipped across the dead ground as Rylan and Tyrixa made their way toward the collapsed station. The old mining facility looked like it had been struck from orbit, half buried under scorched rock and broken support towers, its outer walls caved inward like a crushed ribcage. Whatever had happened here hadn't been natural. Rylan crouched near the entrance, brushing aside the brittle remains of a shattered door. The signals coming from just below, maybe 2 levels down. Still active. Tyrixa stepped beside him, her eyes scanning the jagged dark. I smell rot. Old blood. Not fresh. Still want to go in? She glanced at him. If someone calls for help, I answer. Ryland gave a grim smile. That's why I trust you. They entered the ruins in silence. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of decay. The hallway was cracked, the walls scorched with what looked like burn marks, yet there were no signs of bodies, no skeletons or discarded weapons. Just ruin. Tyrixa sniffed the air again, her ears flattening slightly. Something took them. They descended into the lower levels using a maintenance ladder, their boots echoing against rusted steel. Lights flickered sporadically, powered by some ancient backup grid still fighting to survive. A control panel glowed faintly to their left. Rylan moved toward it, wiping dust from the surface. Here. This is the signal. He tapped a few keys. Static filled the chamber. Then, is anyone out there? This is Research Lead Talavex. Colony breached. They weren't what we thought. Static again. Ryland froze. That was recent. The timestamps only 3 days old. Tyrixa tensed, claws slipping from her fingertips with a soft click. Then someone is still here. Another sound reached them. Soft, wet, and dragging. Not mechanical. Not human. Ryland turned slowly toward the dark hallway behind them. A figure stood at the end. Tall. Wrong. Its outline shimmered not with light, but absence. As if it wasn't entirely in this dimension. Its limbs moved slowly, like they didn't know how to belong to the body they were attached to. Its face was stretched, smooth, empty. Tyrixa stepped in front of Ryland before he could move, her body tensed, claws ready. The creature didn't speak. It just took a step forward. And the lights behind it went out. Ryland's pulse thundered in his ears as the last flicker of light vanished behind the thing approaching. Shadows swallowed the corridor, and yet the creature moved with purpose, as if it could feel them in the dark. Tirixa let out a low, warning growl, her stance shifting subtly, centered, ready to strike. Her claws gleamed faintly in the emergency light still pulsing from the control panel. Back slowly, Ryland whispered. Don't turn your back on it. But Tirixa didn't move. The creature halted just outside the edge of the red glow. Its body twitched once, sharply, unnaturally, and then it tilted its head with a silent jerk, as though studying them. Ryland raised his sidearm. The creature hissed. No, not hissed, it vibrated. The sound came not from a mouth, but from the air around it, warping reality like a ripple in a pond. Tirixa lunged. In a blink she was on it, claws slicing forward. But as her strike landed, the creature's body collapsed, folding inward like smoke being pulled into a vacuum. Her claws passed through where it had been, touching nothing. Ryland ran to her side, scanning the hallway. Where did it go? Tirixa breathed hard, scanning the dark. It didn't move. It simply ceased to be. He tapped his wrist link. Whisper, record contact, unknown hostile entity, incorporeal properties, reactive behavior. The AI in their ship acknowledged, its signal crackling faintly through the walls. We have to find the source of that signal, Ryland said. Someone might still be alive, and I'm not leaving them here with that. Tirixa nodded once. Agreed. But we moved together. They pressed deeper into the station, weapons drawn, light dim and flickering. The walls were etched with strange symbols now, carved into the metal with something sharp. Not writing. More like warnings. Primal. Repetitive. Circular. It felt like a place that wanted to be forgotten. Whatever they were mining here, Ryland said, it wasn't ore. Tirixa glanced at him, golden eyes sharp. It was a prison. And the door had been opened. The deeper they moved into the station, the less it felt like a structure and more like a grave. Every corridor had been warped by heat and time, metal walls bulging, ceilings sagging, lights flickering as if gasping their last breath. But the markings, those grew thicker. Carved in haste, clawed in desperation, etched in spirals so chaotic that even Tirixa, so composed in battle, narrowed her eyes in unease. Ryland knelt beside one of the symbols. These weren't made by the thing we saw. They're too human. Tirixa crouched beside him, her voice low. Perhaps made by what came before it. Or those who tried to contain it. The emergency signal pulsed again, stronger now, guiding them to a reinforced chamber half buried beneath collapsed machinery. A jagged opening had been forced through the outer bulkhead, welded shut from the inside with crude layers of metal. Something had tried to keep something else from getting in, or out. Ryland placed his hand against the door. It was warm. Tirixa touched his wrist. Be ready. He nodded, then pressed the panel. The metal groaned and hissed as the makeshift seal gave way. Light burst from within, clean light. Artificial. Controlled. The chamber beyond was sealed, intact, powered by its own generator. Inside stood a woman, tall, pale, her jumpsuit torn but intact, her skin gaunt but eyes alive. She had a data pad clutched in one trembling hand. Tala Vex, Ryland said quietly. Lead researcher. Her head snapped toward him. Don't let the light go out, she rasped. Don't ever let it go out. Tirixa stepped inside, scanning the corners. Are you alone? Tala's gaze flicked toward the ceiling. Now? Yes. Ryland stepped closer. What happened here? Her mouth worked dry and cracked. We didn't know. It wasn't just buried. It was starved. We fed it, accidentally. Through thought, attention, focus. We noticed it. And that was enough. Tirixa's claws flexed. The creature. Tala nodded. It doesn't kill in the way you think. It unmakes. Erases. It devours memory. Identity. The more we tried to study it, the stronger it became. The more we feared it, the more it learned us. A faint sound echoed in the hall behind them. A whisper. Rylan turned. We're not alone. Tala clutched the pad to her chest. It knows you now. The whisper grew into a low thrum, soft, steady, like breath echoing through the station's ribs. It didn't come from one direction, but all of them, as if the walls themselves had learned to speak. Rylan backed toward the sealed chamber, his sidearm raised, eyes scanning the warped shadows beyond the corridor. Tarixa stepped in front of Tala without hesitation, placing herself between the scientist and the dark. It feeds on attention, Tala whispered. If you look at it too long, if you remember it, it becomes real again. How do we fight something we're not allowed to see? Rylan asked. Tala's eyes glistened. You don't. You run. Or you go dark. Tarixa's eyes locked with Rylan's. The ship. He nodded. We grab what she needs and we get out. Tala clutched her pad. This has everything, scan logs, recordings, test data. It can't reach outside the planet's interference zone, not yet. But if it finds a way... Rylan didn't need more. He gestured to Tarixa. We move. Now. They pushed back into the corridor, Tarixa leading with silent, fluid steps. Her fur bristled with tension, and her tail was coiled tight. The lights flickered violently now, each pulse a strobe of panic. The whispering turned rhythmic, like a heartbeat in the walls, one that didn't match their own. As they passed the junction, Rylan turned just enough to see a figure in the hallway ahead, one of the missing colonists, or what had once been one. Its body was still, standing perfectly upright, but its face was wrong, smooth, empty, a blur of almost features. Don't look, Tala hissed. Don't name it. Don't give it anything. Tarixa's claws slid out, her golden eyes narrowing. Too late. The figure took a step forward. Then another. Then many. Dozens of shadows emerged from the dark, silent, shifting, memoryless husks. All of them wrong. All of them watching. We run. Rylan growled. Now! They bolted. Tarixa struck fast and silent, knocking one creature aside as it lunged. It shattered like glass on impact, its body crumbling into ash before hitting the ground. Rylan fired twice, each blast connecting, but barely slowing the rest. They weren't real in the way living things were. They were echoes. Leftovers. Memories turned against them. And the deeper they ran, the louder the station became, like it was waking up. Not alive, but aware. They burst out of the collapsed structure into the pale, dead air of K-17's surface. The ardent whisper sat ahead like a silent savior, its hull half-dusted in ash and wind-blown grit. The whispering didn't fade when they left the station, it only grew fainter, like it had sunk into their skin. Rylan slammed his hand on the access panel. Open up now! The ramp dropped with a hiss, steam curling into the frozen dusk. Tarixa spun on her heel, covering the rear as shadows slithered from the breach behind them. Forms that didn't move with legs but glided, shapes that bent wrong, as if reality forgot how they were meant to stand. Tala stumbled up the ramp, cradling her pad like a lifeline. Rylan followed, but Tarixa lingered at the base, eyes locked on the advancing husks. One reached the threshold. She struck without a sound, 1, 2, 3 brutal slashes, and the thing cracked like glass under a hammer, disintegrating into a swirl of powder. Another replaced it instantly, and another behind that. Tarixa! Rylan shouted from the cockpit hatch. I am not leaving you behind. She growled, spinning, and leapt up the ramp. The doors slammed shut behind her just as the nearest entity struck the hull. Instead of a thud, there was silence, like the sound had been stolen. Rylan launched the engines with shaking fingers. Get us into orbit! Tala shouted, clinging to the rails. It can't follow outside the atmospheric veil. You sure about that? Rylan muttered. No, she said. But it's our only shot. The whisper roared as it lifted into the sky, the inertial force shoving them against the seats. Through the rear monitor, they could see the creatures on the ground, still, unmoving, watching. They made no move to follow. But as the atmosphere peeled away and stars returned, Rylan noticed something in the scanner feed. A flicker. Not from the planet. From the ship. Tarixa saw it too. What did we bring with us? Tala's face went pale. It remembers us now. Rylan locked in the nav. Then we find a way to forget it, before it finds the rest of the galaxy. They left K-17 in silence. But the whisper had already entered the dark. The ardent whisper cut through the black like a knife, engines burning cold as it escaped K-17's gravity well. Inside the ship, silence reigned, but not the kind that comforted. This silence pressed against their eardrums, made their skin prickle. It was watching them. Tarixa paced the narrow cabin, her claws extended, tail twitching with restrained tension. There's something here. Rylan checked the scanner again. No life signs. Atmosphere stable. No foreign signals. Tala huddled near the auxiliary terminal, eyes locked on her data pad. It doesn't need atmosphere. Or form. It exists where attention flows. If we carry it, it's through thought, not mass. Rylan turned toward her. Then how do we get rid of it? She hesitated. There's a reason no one came back from the first colony. They didn't try to contain it. They tried to forget it. Entire teams died, just to erase what they'd seen. Tarixa growled softly. I will not erase him. Rylan looked up. She stared at Tala. You speak of forgetting. You do not understand what that means to me. Rylan stepped closer to her, gently placing a hand on her arm. No one's erasing anything. She was trembling, just barely, but he could feel it. Not from fear. From instinct. She was a warrior, trained to fight anything with claws and speed and force. But this thing wasn't flesh. It was presence. It fed not on blood but on remembrance. Maybe we don't destroy it, he said. Maybe we trap it again. Tala looked skeptical. With what? Rylan glanced at the power core diagnostic feed. What about a memory loop? Lock it in a synthetic feedback, permanently focused on a recursive thought. An artificial mind that never forgets, never stops thinking, but never acts. Tala blinked. An echo chamber. Tarixa stepped closer. A prison made of thought. It might work, Tala said slowly. But it has to be built manually, and the AI would need to be isolated, disconnected from all networks. We'd have to create it ourselves. Here. Rylan glanced at Tarixa. You ready to build a ghost trap out of raw code and scraps? She bared her fangs. Give me something to fight, and I will fight it. Rylan cracked a grin. That's my girl. Tala raised a brow at them both. Then we better move fast. Because the longer it lingers in our minds. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. The dim hum of the ardent whisper's systems was the only sound as Rylan stripped the outer shell from the ship's auxiliary logic core. Wires spilled out like tendrils, and his hands moved with focused precision, cutting, reconfiguring, isolating every channel. Across the cabin, Tarixa crouched beside a heat regulator she had torn from the wall, her claws working like surgical tools as she peeled away unnecessary components and stacked what they could salvage. Tala remained at the ship's central console, typing furiously into her pad. I'm rewriting an old research AI, she said, her voice tense but clear. Its memory loop was used for emotional pattern recognition. We'll turn that into obsession. Won't that strengthen it? Rylan asked. Not if we trap it in a closed loop. It'll think forever. But never remember us. Tarixa handed him a crystalline memory node, her tail brushing lightly against his boot. Use this. Holds more than your human cores. He took it, his fingers brushing hers. Thanks. She paused a beat, then leaned close. You are sweating. I usually do when I'm rigging a ghost box out of spare parts and a dream. She gave him a look, half smile, half threat. Do not joke about this. He softened. Wasn't a joke. Just nerves. She leaned in further. If it touches you again, if it tries to take you, I will rip its presence from the void itself. He gave her a quiet, tired smile. I know. Tala's fingers stilled. It's ready. Rylan and Tarixa stepped to her side as she projected the AI's interface, a glowing white sphere hovering in midair. No face, no voice. Just light. I've hardwired the loop, Tala said. It'll fixate on the first thing we give it. We just need to focus the entity's attention into the AI. Tarixa tilted her head. How do we make a shadow look into a mirror? Tala looked at Rylan. We call it. Rylan's stomach turned. You want us to remember it? Yes. But only long enough to force it into the trap. Tarixa's eyes narrowed. It is dangerous. Yeah, Rylan said, stepping forward. But so was everything we've survived. He drew a deep breath and closed his eyes. He let the memory in. The corridor. The hollow face. The silence that watched. A cold weight pressed against his chest. And somewhere in the ship, the whisper began again. But this time, they were ready. The whisper slithered back into the ship like smoke under a door, thin at first, subtle, a pressure behind the eyes. But it built quickly, like water rising behind a cracking dam. The lights dimmed. The temperature dropped. Rylan clenched his jaw as a low, vibrating hum filled the air around them. Tarixa's fur bristled as she stepped closer, her body positioned protectively between him and the dark corners of the cabin. Her claws were out, but there was nothing physical to slash. Only presence. Tala gripped the interface console. It's here. The entity's consciousness is in the forward sensor array. It's already manipulating EM patterns. Can it hear us? Rylan asked, fighting the chill that crept up his spine. No. It doesn't hear. It feels. It reacts to cognition. Thought. Focus. Tarixa turned toward the AI core. Then we give it a mind to feed on. Rylan nodded, stepping forward to the glowing white sphere. You said it fixates on the first thing it connects with, right? Tala hesitated. Yes, but Rylan, if you link directly. I won't give it me, he said. I'll give it this. He inserted the crystalline node into the AI's core and activated the feedback loop. The sphere pulsed, its glow dimming for a moment before brightening to a sharp, piercing white. The air shuddered. Tarixa hissed low. It knows. The lights exploded into a kaleidoscope of color, blinking in sync with the sphere. The whisper roared now, inside their minds, not their ears. Rylan felt it lurch toward him, a hunger built from memory and fear. He pictured the thing. The corridor. The first encounter. Then he thought of the AI. And forced the memory toward it. The AI pulsed. A high-pitched whine filled the ship, and for a moment, Rylan felt his thoughts stretch thin, as if something were being pulled from him. Then it snapped. The sphere surged with blinding light. And the whisper stopped. Just like that. Silence. Real silence. Tarixa reached for him immediately, her hands sliding across his shoulders, checking his pulse, his breath, his eyes. You are here. He met her gaze, dazed but steady. I'm here. Tala exhaled for the first time in what felt like minutes. We did it. The AI's locked in a recursive memory loop, it's consuming the entity's awareness. Like feeding a ghost its own reflection. Rylan stumbled, and Tarixa caught him, cradling him against her chest. Rest, she said firmly. You gave too much. He smiled weakly. Worth it. The AI continued to glow, quiet, stable. They hadn't destroyed the entity. But they had trapped it. And that was enough. Rylan drifted in and out of consciousness, his head resting against the warmth of Tarixa's shoulder. The hum of the Ardent Whisper's engines was steady again, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Gone was the unnatural silence. Gone were the whispers. For the first time in what felt like forever, the ship felt like a ship again. Tarixa held him close on the floor of the cabin, her arms wrapped tightly around his torso, her breath soft against his neck. She didn't move. Didn't speak. Just held him, as if any distance between them might let the darkness creep back in. Tala worked quietly at the console, monitoring the AI sphere. It still pulsed faintly with light, an endless loop of a memory that wasn't real. The entity, whatever it had been, was locked inside. Dormant. Thinking. Forgetting. I've set the AI's containment core to isolate completely, Tala said softly. It'll stay sealed. No signals in, no signals out. It's thinking itself to death. Tarixa didn't respond at first. Then, if it ever wakes? Tala's fingers paused. Then we destroy the ship. Rylan stirred slightly at that, his eyes fluttering open. That's a last resort, right? Tarixa exhaled through her nose, clearly unimpressed with the plan. You are awake. He smiled faintly, reaching up to touch her cheek. Hard to stay out with you holding me like that. She didn't smile back, but the tension in her shoulders eased. You scared me. I scared myself. She leaned in, pressing her forehead gently against his. Do not do that again. He chuckled softly. I'll try. Tala stepped away from the console. We need to report this. Get the sphere to a secure Black Vault facility. Deep archive. Maybe deeper than that. Alliance won't want to risk transporting it, Rylan muttered. They'll have to. Because if this thing spreads... He pushed himself up with Tarix's help, still weak but recovering. Let's get to a relay station. Get a message out. Then we bury it. Tarixa helped him to his feet. And then? Rylan looked at her. Really looked. We take leave. Her ears twitched. Leave? He nodded. Somewhere warm. Quiet. Just us. Tarixa tilted her head. With a larger bed? He grinned. Absolutely. She finally allowed a small, sharp smile to tug at the corner of her mouth. Then I approve. Together, they turned toward the cockpit. And for the first time in days, the path ahead looked clear. 3 days later, the Ardent Whisper docked at Relay Station Epsilon 4, a remote outpost floating in orbit above a barren moon. Isolated, lightly staffed, and most importantly, secure. The kind of place where secrets were stored and questions weren't asked unless someone really wanted answers. Tala handed off the containment sphere to a stern-faced Alliance Black Ops officer. No words were exchanged. Just a nod. A signature. And then it was gone, sealed in a radiation-proof, signal-dampened vault deeper than any comm network could penetrate. Rylan watched it go, his arms folded. Let's hope that's the last we ever hear of that thing. Tarixa stood beside him, tail lazily curled behind one leg, her golden eyes scanning every corridor like she expected the shadows to reach out again. It will not escape. You sound sure. I am. He believed her. Later, after debriefs and endless files were uploaded, Rylan was finally granted leave. Full clearance. 2 weeks. Maybe 3. He didn't ask questions. He just requested a warm planet and a ship with real beds. Tarixa didn't need convincing. They found a quiet moon on the edge of a red dwarf system. Lush forests, soft rain, no cities, just one stone and glass villa nestled on a hillside overlooking waterfalls and wide stretches of jungle. Their rented ship touched down with a soft hum, and before the engines even cooled, Tarixa was outside barefoot in the grass, breathing in the air like it was made of starlight. Rylan stepped down after her, watching her move through the trees, her bronze-orange fur catching streaks of golden light. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The tension that had wrapped itself around her since K-17 slowly unwound in the breeze. That night, the bed was exactly what they needed. Big. Warm. Private. Tarixa curled around him, her breath soft against his neck, her claws trailing idly over his chest, not in warning, not in defense. Just touch. Just closeness. You're healing, he murmured. So are you, she whispered. We both carry scars. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. But we're still here. She nestled closer. And I will stay. As long as you choose me. I do, he said. Every day. Outside, the jungle sang with the low rhythm of alien life. But inside, everything was still. And Rylan knew, without doubt, that the war for their souls had already been fought. And they had won. The villa overlooked a stretch of crystalline river that shimmered beneath the twin moons. Ryland stood ankle-deep in the water, his shirt hanging over a branch nearby, the cool current washing over his bare feet. Tarixa sat on a smooth, flat stone nearby, her legs crossed, tail swaying lazily behind her as she sharpened a blade she had taken from the ship. She wasn't expecting trouble here, but instinct was hard to ignore. "You know we don't need weapons out here," Ryland called, glancing back at her with a smirk. Tarixa didn't look up. "You said the same thing on Frosix. Just before the ice cracked under us. That was different," he muttered. "This place is peaceful." She ran the whetstone along the edge of the blade. "Until it's not." Ryland waded toward her, the water lapping gently at his calves, and dropped down beside her on the warm rock. "You can let your guard down. Just a little." Her golden eyes flicked toward him. "If I do, will you stop teasing me about being paranoid?" "Not a chance." She narrowed her eyes. "Then I'll keep the blade." He chuckled and leaned back on his hands, looking up at the stars. "You know what I miss?" "What?" "Nothing." He turned to her. "Because for the first time in years, I don't feel like I've left anything behind." Tarixa's posture softened slightly. She set the blade down, her hand drifting over his as he lay beside her. "Even if they call you back?" "If they do, I'll answer. But I'm not going without you." She looked at him long and hard. "And if they say I cannot go?" Ryland didn't blink. "Then they'll be looking for another pilot." Her hand tightened over his. There were no whispers here. No creatures hiding in the void. No nightmares trying to crawl into their memories. Just stars. Just wind. And the warm thrum of her body pressed against his beneath the endless sky. She leaned in, nuzzling his neck. "Then I choose this place. And I choose you." He smiled. "Good. Because I plan to keep you." Her tail curled around his leg again, slow and sure. And neither of them moved for a long, long time. The peace held, for a while. Days passed in a dreamlike rhythm. Ryland and Tarixa spent their mornings tangled in each other's warmth beneath silken sheets, and their afternoons hiking the ridgelines or swimming in the cool forest pools. She laughed more now, low and rare, like thunder you didn't mind hearing. And he touched her more boldly, with the ease of someone who knew what it meant to be wanted, and chosen. But nothing beautiful lasted forever. The message came on a private frequency. Ryland found it blinking on the comm console one quiet night, the light barely visible in the soft orange glow of the villa's hearth. "Urgent, return to Station Orion. Code Black." Attached was a data fragment. He opened it. Then wished he hadn't. Video, grainy, distorted, corrupted with static. But he saw enough. A research station. Screams. Shadows crawling across the walls. And that same whisper in the background. Tarixa entered behind him silently. She saw the tension in his body before she saw the screen. "What is it?" she asked, her voice already sharp. Ryland turned toward her, jaw tight. "Another breach." She crossed the room in 2 strides, claws out, golden eyes narrowing. "The sphere?" He shook his head. "Still buried. This is something else." She stared at the flickering feed, then at him. "They want us to go." He didn't answer. "Then we go," she said firmly. "You don't have to." "I do." Ryland stepped toward her, brushing his hand against her cheek. "We just started living. We're not done," she whispered, pressing her forehead to his. "But if that darkness has returned, then we are the ones who finish it." They packed their gear in silence. No goodbye. No delay. Only resolve. Because they both knew what waited at the end of that jump wasn't just another mission. It was the final chapter. And they would face it together. The ardent whisper launched from the moon's soft soil under cover of dawn. The clouds glowed gold behind them, and for a moment, Ryland looked back at the villa, at the world where they had almost believed peace was permanent. Tarixa sat beside him in the cockpit, her form wrapped in new armor, sleek, matte black plating over her bronze fur, molded for speed and silent movement. Her tail flicked against the floor once, sharp and deliberate. She wasn't mourning the peace. She was preparing for war. Rylan broke the silence. Orion Station's last recorded signal came from deep orbit above a gas giant in the Niberian Drift. No other vessels have responded. And comms. Dead? Tarixa finished. Like before. He nodded. But this time, they weren't flying in blind. Rylan had modified the AI core. Not the prison. They wouldn't risk carrying that again. But a copy of its structure, stripped of the entity, left as a sensor, something that could detect the wrongness before it took form. Tala Vex hadn't joined them. She'd gone dark after delivering the sphere to Alliance vaults. But her work lived on in the code Rylan now ran. The signal fragment said one word. Rylan murmured. It said return. Tarixa turned to him. It remembers us. He met her eyes. Then we end it. The Niberian Drift was nothing but shadows and storms. Great streaks of lightning lanced through the swirling red clouds of the gas giant below as the whisper dropped out of FTL. Orion Station loomed ahead, dark, silent, adrift. Dead. Except it wasn't. As they approached, Ryland's scanners pinged movement, slight. Unregistered. Tarixa narrowed her gaze. Not a ship. Not alive. But not gone. Echoes? He asked. Or bait. The station doors were open. Welcoming. That was the first warning. The second? As the whisper drew near, its instruments blinked once, and for a second, just a breath, every system whispered the same message. We see you. Ryland's knuckles whitened on the controls. Tarixa stood, blades already drawn. They were back in the dark. But this time, they weren't prey. The ardent whisper docked with Orion Station under complete silence. No alarms, no greeting, just the low hiss of pressurization as the airlock sealed. Ryland double-checked every suit seal, every weapon charge. Tarixa stood beside him, her blades crossed against her back, her ears twitching at the unnatural stillness. This place is wrong, she murmured. Like K-17? She shook her head. Worse. K-17 was forgotten. This is inviting. The interior of the station was pristine, too pristine. Lights flickered softly overhead, floors gleamed like they'd been freshly scrubbed, and not a speck of dust remained on the walls. No bodies. No signs of struggle. It was like everyone had simply left. Or been erased. As they moved deeper into the corridor, Ryland's scanner pinged again. Movement. 3 life signs. Tarixa, he whispered. We've got survivors. She tensed but nodded. Trap? Maybe. But if they're real. They followed the ping to the central atrium, a circular room surrounded by glass walls looking out into the void. And there, seated around a table like they were in the middle of a meeting, were 3 humans. Unmoving. Breathing. Eyes open. Alive. But wrong. Their gazes didn't blink. Their expressions didn't shift. Their skin looked too smooth, like wax held just below its melting point. And their mouths, opened slowly, in perfect unison, as if pulled by the same invisible string. Ryland's blood turned to ice. Do not listen, Tarixa growled, stepping in front of him. Close your ears. Look away. Too late. They spoke. 3 voices. 1 tone. You came back. As promised. Ryland took a step back. This isn't them. This isn't any of them. Tarix's claws were out in an instant. It's learning again. Ryland raised his pistol, heart hammering. We never promised you anything. The 3 mouths smiled at once. You remembered us. And now, we are real. The lights snapped off. The station moaned around them like it was alive. And from the walls, the whispers returned, louder than ever before. They weren't being watched. They were being welcomed. The darkness swallowed the room in an instant, but not even shadows could hide what was already taking form. As Ryland and Tarixa fell back toward the door, the walls rippled like disturbed water. Shapes slithered through the metal, faces half-formed, mouths open in silent screams, fingers reaching outward as if pressing against the membrane just thin enough to hold them back. Tyrix's voice cut through the dark. "It is the station." Ryland's light flared, illuminating the atrium just long enough to see that the three human figures had risen from the table. Still smiling. Still speaking in unison. Still not blinking. "Your thoughts gave us weight. Your fear gave us shape. Now you will remember us forever." Ryland fired once, instinctively. The plasma bolt hit the nearest figure square in the chest, and passed through it like light through fog. No blood. No sound. Just a ripple. "Physical force won't work," he snapped. Tyrixa was already pulling him down a corridor, claws dragging sparks from the walls as she slashed open a sealed hatch. "We need to find the source. A mind this strong, it has roots." They darted into the underdeck level, dark, narrow, and filled with power conduits. Emergency lights flickered in long, red pulses, casting their shadows like dying flames. Behind them, the whispers chased, sliding down metal corridors, echoing in their ears and minds. "What are we looking for?" Ryland panted as they ran. "A memory," Tyrixa growled. "The core memory. Before it became many. Before it was spread. Something is feeding it." They burst into the station's central data vault, rows of glowing crystal drives humming softly. Then, a sound. Not a whisper. Not a voice. A heartbeat. It pulsed from one of the drives, old, dusty, long unused. Ryland stepped toward it. "What the hell?" Tyrixa yanked him back just in time. The drive burst open. A black tendril of energy spilled out, writhing like a serpent, trailing mist and fragments of sound, voices from K-17, fragments from the whisper, screams from the buried sphere. It wasn't just a data file. It was the seed. We were never gone. The mist coiled, the whispers rising again. Only waiting. Tyrixa stepped forward, teeth bared, claws glowing with built-up plasma energy. "Then wait no more." She struck. And the room exploded in light. The impact of Tyrixa's strike shattered the central node with a searing flash, sending arcs of energy ripping through the vault. Ryland shielded his face as shards of crystal data drives erupted from the walls like thrown knives, sizzling with raw, exposed memory current. The black mist recoiled, screeching, not in sound, but in a wave of pressure that slammed into them both like a tidal force. Tyrixa stood her ground. Ryland stumbled but caught himself on the wall. "You did it!" "No!" Tyrixa growled, eyes locked on the mist as it convulsed midair, pulling back into itself. "I wounded it. But it still remembers." The mist twisted into a spiral, coalescing into a form again, not human, not anything, just presence. Tendrils of static flickered outward, touching the walls, the floor, the data cores, reaching for anything that could give it shape. Ryland looked around, thinking fast. "It needs memory to survive." "Yes," Tyrixa said through clenched teeth. "And we gave it too much." He snapped his fingers suddenly. "Then we take it back." Her ear twitched. "How?" Ryland rushed to the main console, still active, barely, and slammed in the backup sequence from his personal log core. "The Whispers AI prototype," he muttered. "I stored a mirrored version. Not the entity, just the loop protocol. If I inject it directly into the root node, it will trap itself again." Tyrixa finished, eyes lighting up. "Or it'll kill us both. I accept both outcomes." Ryland gave her a crooked grin. "So romantic." As the mist began to encroach, reaching toward them with smoky fingers trailing echoes of forgotten voices, Ryland activated the loop. The vault screamed. Reality buckled. The air turned heavy, as if gravity had tripled in an instant. The mist surged, lunging toward them. Then it hit the mirrored AI. Light exploded in all directions, white and blinding. Tyrixa lunged for Ryland, shielding his body with hers as the memory core detonated, not in fire, but in thought. For one brief second, every sound they'd ever heard, every word, every scream, every breath, cycled around them in perfect clarity. Then, silence. Real silence. When the light faded, the mist was gone. The core dark. The whisper silenced. Rylan coughed, blinking. Did it work? Tarixa helped him sit up, brushing his hair from his face with one clawed hand. We are still here. He reached up, cupped her cheek, and exhaled. Then it did. She leaned into his touch. And for the first time since stepping foot on the station, there was no memory of fear. Only each other. Updated saved memory. Perfect. We'll begin steering the story toward its conclusion, keeping the emotion strong and the bond between Rylan and Tarixa at the center. Let's bring it home with closure, clarity, and one last test of their connection. The hours after the breach were eerily quiet. Rylan and Tarixa moved through Orion Station with weapons drawn, checking every corridor, every shadow. But there were no more whispers. No movement behind walls. No unnatural eyes watching from the dark. Whatever the entity had been, it was gone, trapped, starved, or finally erased. They found no survivors. No bodies either. Just clothes, dropped like memories shed. Tarixa crouched near a console in the medbay, tracing a claw across a photograph pinned to the edge of a monitor. A crew member smiling beside a sibling, the caption faded beneath it. She didn't speak, but Rylan saw the tension in her shoulders. This wasn't your fault, he said softly. I know, she replied, standing slowly. But I still carry them. All of them. You don't have to carry them alone. Her tail wrapped loosely around his leg. A gesture so natural now it didn't even make him flinch. They reached the command deck and initiated the emergency beacon, transmitting one last message to Alliance Command. Rylan's voice was steady as he recorded it. This is Lieutenant Shaw, attached to vessel Ardent Whisper. Orion Station's threat has been neutralized. No survivors. No contamination. Advise full quarantine. Containment measures successful. We're coming home. He looked at Tarixa when he said it. We're coming home. She nodded once, sharp and sure. When they returned to the ship, Tarixa sat beside him in the cockpit, silent as the station grew smaller behind them. You think it's really over? Rylan asked. No, she said. But I think we are stronger than what waits in the dark. Rylan reached over, fingers brushing her hand. Together? She squeezed his hand in return. Always. The stars opened up before them. And this time, when they jumped to light speed, it felt like moving towards something real. Toward peace. The Ardent Whisper coasted through the void, silent and whole. There was no chase behind them this time. No ripple of fear in the sensors. Just the soft hum of the engines and the low thrum of Rylan's heartbeat as he stood alone in the cargo bay, watching the containment data crystal pulse faintly in its sealed casing. No entity. No danger. Just the ghost of what had been, archived, encrypted, and ready to be buried where no mind would ever reach it again. Tarixa entered behind him, her bare feet silent on the metal floor. Her armor was gone, replaced by the loose linen robe she wore when she slept. Orange fur kissed with morning light. Her eyes, tired, steady, met his. You're thinking about keeping it, she said. He turned to her, surprised. You think I'm that reckless? I think you're that curious. He walked toward her, looping an arm gently around her waist. Not this time. I'm done chasing shadows. Tarixa leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. And if they come again? Then we face them. Like we always do. She purred softly at that, her tail brushing lazily around his leg. The Alliance gave us 3 months. He raised a brow. 3 months of what? Leave. Sanctuary. Time. He blinked. They actually listened? They said something about survival against impossible odds. She smirked faintly. And reputation. He laughed. Let's not get used to it. They left the cargo bay and walked through the corridor side by side, the lighting dimmed to a soft amber glow. No alarms. No emergencies. No missions. Rylan glanced at her. Where do you want to go? Tarixa tilted her head. Somewhere green. And quiet. I know just the place, he said. Still have the coordinates saved from before. She stopped him gently with a hand to his chest. Will you choose me again? He didn't hesitate. Every day. She leaned up and kissed him, slow and sure, and this time, there were no ghosts left between them. Just stars. Just breath. And a future entirely their own.